At first glance, Friday, 1995, looks like nothing more than a lazy day on the porch. Two friends joking around while trouble comes and goes. But behind those funny one-liners lies a world that's painfully real. A neighborhood pulled straight from the director's childhood. An Ice Cube known for toughness suddenly playing a quiet underdog. A Chris Tucker who almost lost the role of Smokey after a terrible first audition. And a whole mix of fears, memories, and real people folded into one seemingly meaningless Friday. When the cast later revealed what really happened behind the scenes, the tiny paychecks, the moments of humor drawn from real struggles, the decisions that almost changed the entire film. Friday stopped being just a comedy and became something deeper, a slice of youth stuck in place, laughing just to avoid breaking. And once you hear these truths, you'll never look at that Friday the same way again. Now let's dive into the 15 strange secrets the cast of Friday revealed, the ones you never knew while watching the movie. Part 1. A lazy day born from anger. Craig sits on the front porch, pretending nothing important is happening. But deep down, he knows his life is stuck. No job, no money, being scolded. All of it wrapped into one Friday that looks pointless on the surface. Later, the cast revealed that Craig's world wasn't random at all. Ice Cube and DJ Pooh wrote this story out of their frustration with hood movies that were only about violence. They wanted to show the everyday but still painful side of South Central, a place where people laugh a lot but still carry the weight of money problems, unemployment, and fear. Every time someone tells Craig, "You never do anything right," it's not just a line of dialogue, it's the real feeling of many people in real neighborhoods condensed into one character. Part 2. Craig standing on a real street from the director's childhood. When Craig sits on the steps watching the block move, kids running around, Debo riding through on his bike, neighbors coming and going, he has no idea he's standing on the very street of F. Gary Gray's childhood. The cast later shared that most of the film was shot in about 20 days on a real block in South Central, where the director grew up. His childhood home even appears in the background in the scene where Debo punches Red. Craig feels trapped in this nowhere neighborhood, but that very dead-end street became the foundation of a classic movie, a place where just sitting on the porch is enough for the whole world to pass by. Part 3. A jobless guy played by actors who were barely paid. All day, Craig has to listen to his father complain about bills, money, and what it means to be a real man. Behind the camera, the money story was just as rough. Years later, Ice Cube revealed that Friday was a very low-budget film, shot in just a few weeks, and the actors were paid union minimum. Some roles worked only a day or two for very little. While Craig, in the story, is struggling after being fired on his day off, the people playing him and everyone around him were also taking a risk on a project that could easily have failed. The pattern repeats. Every time Craig thinks he's not worth anything, the film itself proves the opposite. From a tiny budget, it grew into a legend. Part 4. Smokey almost wasn't Smokey. Many times, Craig glances over at Smokey, this friend who keeps causing trouble and dragging him into messes, with a kind of exhausted disbelief. Strangely, the cast later revealed that Smokey almost wasn't played by Chris Tucker at all. Co-writer DJ Pooh originally planned to play Smokey himself, and the studio floated other names too, before the team finally locked in Tucker. In the film, Craig feels like Smokey is the only thing that never changes in his chaotic life. But behind the scenes, The role was constantly shifting before it landed. It mirrors Craig's inner pattern. Even the person closest to him feels unstable, as if nothing in his life is guaranteed. Part 5. A terrible first audition almost cost Craig his partner in crime. Whenever Smokey rambles, laughs, and throws Craig into one ridiculous situation after another, Craig often looks at him like, "What planet are you from?" Ironically, the cast has recalled that Chris Tucker's first audition wasn't great. At first, he tried to stick to the script too tightly, afraid to improvise. Only when he was told he could go all out did Tucker unleash the wild energy that became Smokey, making Ice Cube and the crew crack up and seal the decision. In the story, Craig tends to hold back and observe, while Smokey breaks every rule. On set, it was the same. The film truly came alive only when one person dared to break the structure, and the other became the steady center that everything revolves around. Part 6. A character who loves smoke, played by someone who barely touched it. On screen, Craig often glares at Smokey like, "Can you stop smoking so much?" But some people close to the production later joked that Chris Tucker, in real life, hardly used anything at all. If you watch closely, the way he holds the joint sometimes even looks a bit clumsy, like someone who isn't really a regular user. So while Craig has to put up with the consequences of a friend who seems high all day, the actor behind that friend was actually much cleaner than the character. There's a repeated pattern here. Craig's life keeps getting pulled into chaos by people who look irresponsible, but in reality, they're often just playing roles shaped by the environment around them. Part 7. Debo is more than just Craig's nightmare. Whenever Debo appears, Craig always reacts the same way. He goes quiet, avoids eye contact, and tries to make himself smaller. That fear wasn't built from pure imagination. Later on, Tiny Zeus Lister Jr. shared that he drew inspiration for Debo from a real-life street figure, someone whose presence truly scared people. To Craig, Debo is everything he hates about the neighborhood: bullying, theft, and never being respected. Knowing that Debo was shaped from real people gives Craig's fear a second layer of meaning. He's not just running from a big guy in a movie, but from a very real type of person that many Craigs have had to avoid their whole lives. Part 8. The feeling of living someone else's real life. Craig keeps muttering, "Why does this stuff always happen to me?" As if this Friday is an endless loop of bad luck. For the cast, that déjà vu feeling was very real too. Ice Cube has said that many of the movie's situations, from being fired on a day off to the style of the friends and neighbors, were pulled straight from real experiences. A cousin who got fired from a delivery job, people selling on the corner, debts, favors, and trouble that wouldn't go away. No wonder Craig walks across the screen like someone who has lived this day 1,000 times already. Every setback he suffers is a quiet callback to dozens of real lives where getting fired for nothing or being dragged into someone else's mess is just a regular Friday. Part 9. A neighborhood that's both a set and a career launch party. When Craig sits on the porch and watches kids running by, strange neighbors passing through, and the neighborhood's daily madness unfolding, he thinks it's all just another boring day on his block. But later, the cast realized that Street was much more than a setting. It was a launch pad. In that little neighborhood, you see faces that at the time were just extras or tiny roles, but later became big stars. Craig believes he's stuck in a dead-end community, but all around him, careers are quietly beginning. Once again, the pattern repeats. He feels like he's going nowhere, while the movie about him is actually sending a whole group of people straight into Hollywood. Part 10. Porch-sitting scenes that were once considered too boring. Craig has a habit of avoiding tough decisions by staying on the porch, watching the world go by. The pace of the movie is slow in those moments. Many scenes are just two guys talking about nothing and everything. At one point, there was pressure for Friday to be more of a wild, party-style comedy, but Ice Cube and F. Gary Gray insisted on keeping those porch scenes exactly how they remembered their own neighborhoods. Unhurried, heavy with small talk and big worries. What some people first criticized as just two guys not doing anything is exactly what turned Craig into an icon. Every time he hides from his problems by sitting still, the film gives the audience another chance to look deeper into the quiet frustration of a young man caught between responsibility and hopelessness. Part 11. A film judged too quickly, but that outlived every criticism. Craig knows exactly what it feels like to be judged without a fair chance. He gets fired, even though he insists he's innocent. Neighbors label him lazy, and even his own family doubts him. Ironically, Friday went through the same thing when it first came out. At the time, it was treated by many as just another simple comedy, with critics giving it mixed reviews, even though it made decent money for its small budget. But just like Craig finally standing up to Debo, the film quietly fought back over time, through VHS tapes, cable reruns, and word of mouth. It became a cult classic, with lines and moments that people still quote decades later. The pattern appears again. What's underestimated in the beginning ends up lasting the longest. Part 12, when the toughest guy in America had to learn to stand back. In the eyes of his neighborhood, Craig is a guy who won't amount to much. In real life, Ice Cube was already seen as one of the toughest voices in West Coast rap. The director later admitted he was worried at first that audiences wouldn't accept this fierce rapper playing a quiet, often defeated young man who mostly frowns, watches, and holds his anger in. The cast has said that Ice Cube's decision to play Craig as serious, restrained, and low-key is what gave Chris Tucker and the supporting characters room to shine. Craig in the story is just like that. The more he's forced to swallow his pride, the more he becomes a mirror, reflecting the chaos and comedy of everyone around him. Part 13. The father's lecture is both dialogue and a generational cry. Every time Craig thinks about picking up a gun, his father cuts in with a lecture. A real man doesn't need weapons to prove himself. The bathroom scene where his dad talks to him is funny on the surface, but surprisingly deep underneath. Many tributes to John Witherspoon have pointed to that moment as one of his most unforgettable, with several lines that feel like they came from his own thoughts about fatherhood and street violence. Craig has a repeating pattern. Whenever he's cornered, he thinks of violence as the answer. That scene with his father is one of the rare times the loop is broken, not just in the movie, but in the minds of many viewers who grew up hearing that speech. Part 14. When Craig realizes he's only the first piece of a much longer story. By the end of the day, Craig thinks he's just survived one crazy Friday. He still has no job, still lives with his parents, and still stays in the same troubled neighborhood. He's only gained a small victory against Debo and a new connection with Debbie. But from the cast's perspective, that Friday was just the beginning. The film's success led to Next Friday and Friday After Next, and years of talk about a final chapter. Inside the story, Craig is terrified that there's nothing waiting for me in the future. Outside of it, the future of Friday became enormous. The cast remembers waiting for scripts, losing co-stars over the years and feeling both grateful and bittersweet that a small neighborhood story had grown into a multi-generational phenomenon. Part 15. A do-nothing day that quietly changed everyone's life. At the end of the film, Craig still doesn't have a job, still sleeps in his old room, still lives under the same roof in the same block. All he has is a small win against Debo and a new chance with Debbie. But if you look from the cast's point of view, that one Friday, with its simple script, single street, and low-paid crew, completely changed the course of many lives. Chris Tucker shot upward into stardom. Ice Cube proved himself as an actor and writer, and a whole wave of careers got their spark from that day. Craig's habit is to tell himself, "I never do anything important." Yet the strangest final truth is this: the day he thought was the most useless in his life became the most important one. For him on screen, and for all the real people whose futures started on that little porch in the middle of the neighborhood.